Hello everyone, I'm Scott, and today we're going to do our last Brothers War spoiler video, and today we're going to look at the top 10 cards for Standard from the Brothers War set. But before we get started, special thanks again to Caffeinated Gamers for sponsoring our Brothers War spoiler series, and please remember to like and subscribe to the video. We appreciate that, and you'll get further Brothers War content as the Brothers War Standard season plays itself out. So let's look at our cards. So first we've got some honorable mentions. Rage of the Last Transmogrant. For 2 mana you get an artifact creature that's a zombie. And the reason I like this card, and I think it's going to see some play, but I'm not sure if it's really a top 10 card, is that most likely for 2 mana you're going to be able to get it out of the graveyard. It gets killed, it goes to the graveyard, you pay 2, it returns to the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it, because most decks are going to be playing with 4 or more non-basic lands that are going to be on the field, and that's almost a guarantee based on what I've seen from the current Standard set. Next we have Mishra's Command. For X and a red mana. You get to choose 2, choose target player. They may discard up to X cards. Then they draw a card for each card discarded this way. So this is a way to help you filter the cards in your deck. Also, then this spell deals X damage to target creature. This spell deals X damage to target planeswalker, or target creature gets X +0 and gains haste until the end of the turn. So I think the flexibility of this card makes it really playable in red, and red needed some flexibility. The fact that you can target a planeswalker, target a creature, I think that's really powerful, because you can take out a creature in the mid to late game, because you're probably sitting on more mana than you need, and that'll be a big help to the red deck. And this could even take down Sheoldred if it's far enough into the game where you've got the 6 mana to do that. Next we have a reprint, Fauna Shaman. For a colorless and a green, you get an elf shaman. That's a 2/2. And more importantly, you can pay a green mana and discard a creature card. And then search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. So if you can get this down on turn 2, you can start filtering your creature cards to get the things you want for a particular matchup. And I think that's just a really, really powerful ability. Right now, it's not in my top 10, basically because we really don't have much green being played in Standard right now. If we do see a dedicated green deck, then this is an even more valuable card. Next we have Platoon Dispenser. For 5 mana you get a artifact creature that's a construct. That's a 4/6. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 2 or more other creatures, you get to draw a card. And for 3 and a white mana, you can create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token, and it is Unearth for 2 and 2 white. The thing that I like about this is that our mid-range decks, our aggro decks, are going to have a lot of creatures on the field based on what we've seen through the Dominaria United Standard season. So I think this ability to basically become a card drawing engine on turn 5 is a very, very powerful ability, and will help aggro decks and mid-range decks churn through their decks. So very close to being a top 10 card, but not quite there. Next, for honorable mentions, we have the Pain Lands. We've got Battlefield Forge, Underground River, Lionaware Waste, and Brushland. Okay, this completes the Pain Lands series from those that we already got in Dominaria United. Now we got all 10 Pain Lands, and I think just because of that, these are going to be very helpful to decks that didn't have the right mana in the current season. This is going to make their mana better, and that should help put some decks onto the into the format now that can do a little bit better. Certainly Underground River, we're seeing a lot of Esper out there. This is just going to be an easy inclusion for that deck. All right, so let's talk about our top 10 cards from Dominaria, or from the Brothers War. All right, first is Siege Veteran. For 2 and a white mana, you get a human soldier. That's a 2/2. And what makes this card a top 10 card in my mind is at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Basically, throughout the last 2 years, we've seen Luminarch Aspirant be an all-star in Standard with that ability. And yes, you're paying an extra mana, but it's still a bonkers ability. If your opponent can't take the card out, you're going to just stack up counters on your creatures turn after turn after turn, and that should be enough over time to win you the game. And the other part of this card that I think makes it a really strong card is whenever another non-token soldier you control dies, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. So you play this card, you attack with some stuff, maybe something dies. With Siege Veteran on the field, it's going to replace itself. And that's just such a powerful ability. And it's going to see play. Soldiers, I think, are a strong tribe in the current meta for the Brothers War Standard season, and probably in a pretty good place for the next couple of years. At number 9, we have Diabolic Intent. This is another reprint. For 1 and a black mana, you get a sorcery. As additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature, and then search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle. 2 mana, go find a card in your deck. Sacrificing a creature isn't all that problematic in the current standard format, but being able to just go get whatever card you need, that's just such a powerful ability. And I think in any black deck there'll be a couple of copies of this, if not 4 copies, because of that ability to just go get whatever you want. At number 8, we have the Might Stone and the Weak Stone and Urza Lord Protector. Okay, these are going to meld to form Urza Planeswalker. So let's talk about the Might Stone and the Weak Stone first. For 5 mana, you get a legendary artifact. That's a Power Stone. And when the Might Stone and the Weak Stone enter the battlefield, choose one. Draw 2 cards, or target creature gets -5/-5 until the end of turn. So you play it, you draw 2 cards, most likely, and then you can also tap it for 2 colorless mana, and this mana cannot be spent to cast non-artifact spells. But it's 2 mana you can then spend on your next turn to help Urza Lord Protector, along with the Might Stone and the Weak Stone, turn into Urza Planeswalker. So Urza Lord Protector costs a colorless mana, a white and a blue for a legendary creature who's a human artificer. That's a 2/4. Artifact, instant, and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And for 7 mana, if you both own and control Urza Lord Protector and an artifact named the Might Stone and the Weak Stone, exile them, then meld them into Urza Planeswalker, activate only as a sorcery. So basically on turn 3 you can play Urza, on turn 4 you play the Might Stone and the Weak Stone, and then on turn 5 you meld them to get Urza Planeswalker. Okay, Urza is a legendary Planeswalker. It has 7 loyalty, and it has the bonker ability of you may activate the loyalty abilities of Urza Planeswalker twice each turn rather than only once. So twice each turn you get to build Urza up. So after the first turn you can actually activate Urza's ultimate the turn after that. So for +2 artifact, instant, and sorcery spells you cast, this turn costs 2 less to cast, you gain 2 life. +1, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. For 0, you get to create 2 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens. And for -3, you can exile target non-land permanent. And then the ultimate ability is for -10, artifacts and planeswalkers you control gain indestructible until the end of turn, destroy all non-land permanents. So basically, Urza is going to want to be in an artifact creature deck where you've got artifacts, you've been attacking with them throughout the game, and then you are able to transform Urza hopefully on turn 5. You transform him, you activate a couple of loyalty abilities, and then on turn 6, you probably can wipe out your opponent's board while maintaining not only Urza, but any artifacts you have in play as well. So I think this is a pretty powerful ability. And if you can pull off the combo to get Urza Planeswalker, that's the game, and you're going to win it most likely. Next, we have at 7, Gix Yawgmoth Praetor. For a colorless mana and 2 black, you get a legendary creature. That's a Phyrexian Praetor. That's a 3/3. This card is really powerful for this reason. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 life. If they do, they draw a card. So basically, if any of your creatures deal damage to an opponent, okay, and it says one of your creatures. So if 2 of them pay damage, you can pay 2 life to draw 2 cards. So I think this is just a bonkers ability on Gix that basically over a couple of turns you're going to have significant card advantage with Gix, and I think that in and of itself makes this very playable, whether it's in mono black, whether it's in the Esper deck, whether it's in Grixis. I mean, I think there are multiple decks out there that are going to want this card for that draw ability. And you also can, for 7 mana, discard X cards and then exile the top X cards of target opponent's library. You may play lands and cast spells from among them. The cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. So you pay 7 mana, you discard some cards, and then at that point you get to play those cards, which is a bonkers ability as well, to just get a look at your opponent's deck and then be able to play all those cards, which is another very strong ability. While I don't think that's going to be happening very often, but the possibility of it is something that definitely would help any deck that's playing Gix. At number 6, we have Myrel, Shield of Argiv. For 3 and a white mana, you get a legendary creature that's a human soldier. So another card that goes into our soldier deck. That's a 3/4. And the reason Myrel, I think, is so powerful is her abilities. First, during your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. So this is Teferi Time Raveler's ability, but on a body. And we saw Teferi during the 2 years after War of Spark came out be a dominant card in Standard. It's been also a card that's seen a tremendous amount of play in Modern. It had to get banned from Pioneer because of the strength of it. So as a result of that, Myrel having that same ability, I think, is really, really powerful. And her second ability is whenever Myrel, Shield of Argiv, attacks, you create X 1/1 colorless artifact creature tokens that are soldiers, and where X is the number of soldiers you control. So you're playing this in a dedicated soldier deck. You have 4 or 5 creatures on the field by the time Myrel comes into play. When you're able to attack with her on the next turn, you're creating 2, 3, 4, 5 additional 1/1s to help your side in the battle. And if you've got a couple of the lords in play, you're creating 2 2s or 3 3s. So if Myrel can survive for a couple of turns, it's probably a win for your side. And I think that ability to just stop things on your opponent from doing anything on your turn is an incredibly powerful ability. And a lot of times your opponent will want to do things on your turn. At 5, we've got Brotherhood's End. For a colorless and 2 red mana, okay, you get to choose one. Brotherhood's End deals 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker, or destroy all artifacts with mana value 3 or less. The flexibility of this card really is attractive to me, because we've seen cards that have the first ability that deal 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker that have seen play across formats, Pioneer, Modern. So that part of it we know is a good effect in red, but that added ability to destroy artifacts with mana values 3 or less, I think, is going to make it a card that's going to see not only Standard play, but Pioneer, possibly down into Modern as well. So we're going to see this card a lot in the near future. At number 4, we have Legions to Ashes. For a colorless and a white and a black mana, you get a sorcery that exiles target non-land permanent an opponent controls and all tokens that player controls with the same name as that permanent. So if you've been copying things and they got a lot of stuff on the field that's been copied, okay, now you can kill one of it and you kill all of it. And we do have a lot of ways to create artifacts that are tokens. We just talked about Myrel's ability. Okay, you kill one of those and you kill all of them. And that's such a powerful ability. This is going to see play in the Esper deck for sure, and it might even make Urza very playable as well. At number 3, we have Awaken the Woods. For X and 2 green mana, you get a sorcery. Create X 1/1 green forest dryad land creatures. This is a really powerful spell. It's a mana ramper. So first you're going to get 1/1 green forest dryad land creature tokens. So they can be used as creatures to attack, or they can simply be used to bump up your mana base And I think that's where we're going to see this. We've got a lot of 7, 8, 9 mana large artifact creatures from the Brothers War set. You cast this on turn 4, turn 5, ramping yourself, 2, 3, maybe if you cast on turn 6, 4 mana, or if you've got something else that'll help bump up the ability for X. You're going to create all these extra lands that will then allow you to play those higher cost creatures. And I think that in its own makes it a very powerful card that's going to see standard play. And I think because of the cards that we've talked about today, I think green is going to be on the rise. We're going to be looking out for what kind of deck is going to form around this, whether it's the artifact deck or something else. And number 2, we have Phyrexian Dragon Engine and Mishra claimed by Gix that will transform when they meld into Mishra lost to Phyrexia. All right, so Phyrexian Dragon Engine costs 3 mana. If it's an artifact creature, it's a Phyrexian Dragon, okay? And it's a 2/2, and it also has double strike. When Phyrexian Dragon Engine enters the battlefield from your graveyard, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 3 cards. Now, that's probably not that great of an ability in the bigger scheme of things with what you're going to want to do with this, but if your opponent kills this early, you do have a way to unearth it to bring it back to the battlefield for that 3 colorless and 2 red mana, which can help you then be able to meld Mishra claimed by Gix and Phyrexian Dragon Engine together to form Mishra lost to Phyrexia. So Mishra claimed by Gix costs 2 mana, a black and a red. You get a Phyrexian Human Artificer, who's a legendary creature. That's a 3/5. And whenever you attack, each opponent loses X life, and you gain X life, where X is the number of attacking creatures. If Mishra claimed by Gix and a creature named Phyrexian Dragon Engine are attacking, and you both own and control them, exile them, then meld them into Mishra lost to Phyrexia. It enters the battlefield tapped and attacking. So basically, if you're able to attack with both of them, they're going to meld into Mishra lost to Phyrexia. And again, you're already going to get that activation trigger for the attack. For your opponent's going to lose some life, you're going to gain some life, and that incidental life gain cannot be underestimated. So this is what you're going to end up with: Mishra lost to Phyrexia. It's a legendary artifact creature that's a Phyrexian Artificer. It's a 9/9. And when Mishra lost to Phyrexia enters the battlefield or attacks, choose 3. Target opponent discards 2 cards. Mishra deals 3 damage to any target. Destroy target artifact or planeswalker. Creatures you control gain menace and trample until the end of the turn. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 until the end of turn. Or you can create 2 tap Power Stone tokens. In my looking at this card, I see this as if you are able to attack with Mishra lost to Phyrexia twice, you probably are going to win the game, because you're going to give your creatures menace and trample, which is going to minimize the ability of your opponent to block things. Okay, they're going to have to make some tough choices. So you might have an equal board state where you have 5 creatures, they have 5 creatures, or you have 3 creatures and they have 3 creatures. But now with the menace, that's going to be a calculation that's going to go in your advantage. And then you can deal 3 damage to any target, possibly taking out a creature, meaning that it can't block something. And then if one of those creatures happens to be an artifact creature, you can kill that as well. So there's tons of options with Mishra, and I'm excited to get in there and play this, because it's going to see play in Rakdos decks, it's going to see play in Grixis decks. So I think this is an exciting card that we're going to see a lot of in the Brothers War Standard season. And finally, at number 1 is Teferi Temporal Pilgrim. And Teferi's number 1 because it's going to slot into the Esper mid-range deck that has been incredibly popular, where 2/3 of those people who were playing at the World Championships were playing some form of Esper mid-range, and this card just wants to go in that deck. So for 3 colorless mana and 2 blue, you get Legendary Planeswalker Teferi with 4 loyalty. And his static ability is whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on Teferi Temporal Pilgrim. So at a minimum, you're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 activations per turn of giving you the ability to put loyalty counters on Teferi. His abilities are this. So for 0 mana, you get to draw a card. You can -2 and create a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with vigilance, and whenever you draw a card, put a +1 counter on this creature. So you're going to, if you do have to go down that road to protect Teferi, it's a 2/2 initially, but every time you draw a card, it's just going to continue to grow, which is really powerful in its own right. And then for -12, target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns it to its owner's hands. Then they shuffle each non-land permanent they control into its owner's library. So this is a board wipe on a planeswalker. And it's a one-sided board wipe because you're going to send everything that they have back to their deck. So anything they have on the field except for land is going back to their library. And because of that, if you untap again with Teferi, you're going to win the game. Teferi's that powerful. And this is going to be a card just like Sheoldred is from Dominaria United, that people are going to see it and they're going to grumble because it's just that powerful. And when you pair it with the Esper deck where you've got Rafine, conniving every turn 2, 3, 4 times, it's not going to take you very long to get to that 12. And I can see situations where if you've got 3 creatures on the field or 4 creatures on the field, you're going to uptick Teferi, get him to 5, you're going to be at 8 or 9, and then your upkeep, you draw another card, and then you're almost at ultimate. At that point, you attack one more time, and then you can ultimate Teferi and clear your opponent's board state out. And that's just going to be a win in a turn or two from that point, because it's going to be really difficult for your opponent to rebuild at that point. All right, so those are my top 10 cards from the Brothers War. Hope you enjoyed the video. Special thanks again to Caffeinated Gamer for sponsoring our Brothers War preview series. And I'll be back with more content throughout the Brothers War season, so be on the lookout for that. And I will see you in the next video.